When I first started embroidering, I mainly would use embroidery hoops, which is primarily what I use today, but there are actually quite a few different options for keeping your fabric tight while you're stitching. And while an embroidery hoop will do the trick most of the time, it's helpful to know the options out there because you may be working on a project that benefits from a different way of holding the fabric. So let's explore some of the different types as well as some pros and cons to using each one. The first tool is the most common one, which is an embroidery hoop. These hoops are generally made of bamboo or some sort of wood, and they come in a variety of different shapes and sizes. I like to stick to smaller sizes of hoops because I find that they pull the fabric tight and keep it tight better, so I don't usually venture past an 8-inch diameter hoop. My favorites are these beechwood hoops as well as Nurge hoops. You can get them in a variety of widths, and I think the width actually helps to grip the fabric a little bit better. And they both have really nice heavy-duty hardware on the top. I try to avoid the pressboard hoops, as you can see right here in this footage. They generally have gaps in between the rings, and it doesn't grip the fabric very evenly. So I would highly recommend spending a couple dollars more for solid wood beechwood hoops. One of the biggest reasons people use embroidery hoops is because they're widely available and they're also beginner friendly due to their quick setup and how easy it is to get the fabric relatively tight. However, people still seem to have fabric tension problems, me included, especially for projects that use more delicate fabrics or they're a larger design that you're using a larger hoop with. This can cause fabric puckering around your embroidery, and it can be super annoying and almost impossible to get out once it happens. This is where I would recommend you maybe venturing into slate frames. Slate frames are a common source of apprehension for a lot of stitchers. A traditional slate frame can take an hour and a half to 2 hours depending on the size of the frame you're setting up. But the one I have here is actually a really nice product that only takes about 5 minutes to set up. And it's super beginner friendly, so it's a great way to dip your toes into slate frames without going all the way in. I was gifted this frame from Artful Fox, and I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested in checking it out. But it essentially skips the process of having to attach the ends of the fabric to the slate frame. It has a little contraption with a wooden dowel that grips the fabric. The setup of this is so simple once you get the hang of it, and the tension that it provides on the fabric is so much better than an embroidery hoop. You can, of course, reinforce the sides like you would with a traditional slate frame, but for this example, I didn't do that. I just skipped that part and the fabric was very, very taut. If your curiosity is piqued and you'd like to know how to set up a slate frame, I do have a tutorial on my YouTube to do that. There are a couple of different benefits to using a slate frame. The main one for me is the fabric tension. It is just so much better. I don't usually experience puckering of the fabric with this. And if you've ever worked on a piece that's really large and you have to move the embroidery hoop around, you'll notice that you start to kind of disturb the weave of the fabric. This makes things like framing really difficult because it warps the fabric in a way that's normally unable to be smoothed out. So I really prefer to use slate frames now if I'm going to be embroidering a piece that's going to be framed. While it does take a little bit more time to set up, I do think that it is worth it in the long run because you will have a better finished piece if you're using the proper materials and tools. And please don't be intimidated by slate frames. Once you learn the process, it's actually relatively simple. If you are able to embroider and sew basic stitches, you can certainly set up a slate frame. This next tool is basically the cross-stitch version of a slate frame, and it's called a scroll frame. This frame has clamps on it, and you can basically clamp your linen or Aida for your cross-stitch projects onto the bars. To put it under tension, you just twist the bar. This is ideal for counted cross-stitch, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for surface embroidery. The next two tools are when you're in a pinch, or maybe you're working on fabric like Aida for a cross-stitch project. Quite a long time ago, I purchased this canvas that's already stretched, but you can also use it as a way to stretch the fabric before you embroider. The canvas on this is usually pre-treated with some sort of sealant for painting on it, and it's not very forgiving, so it's best to remove the canvas off of the bars and then stretch your own fabric on top of it. I don't usually use this method, but it is a perfectly fine method to use, especially if you're in a bind and you don't have an embroidery hoop. The last tool I wanted to share with you are Q-snap frames. These are generally used for projects where you're not really concerned about the tension of your fabric. They're pretty helpful for cross stitch. I don't really love to use them for surface embroidery because they are very flimsy. I did kind of a poor job setting this one up. The fabric is kind of crooked, but as you can see, the linen is relatively flimsy on this snap frame. I would consider using this for a cross stitch project, but definitely not a surface embroidery one. They are really simple to set up, and they also come in a wide variety of sizes, so they are ideal if you are working on a larger project. This is of course not an exhaustive list of every single tool available out there, but I think I hit most of them. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please let me know in the comments what your favorite tool is to use to keep the fabric tight. See you in the next video. Bye!